What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my top 5 bosses of Divinity Original Sin 2. This video comes at a subscriber request, actually, and it seemed like it would be fun to make, so here we are, we're doing it. Now, I do want to mention that this is purely my opinion, feel free to leave in the comment section below your top 5 bosses if you want, but for me, it's definitely this list. So, with no further ado, let's just jump right into this. For number 5, for me it's the end of Act 1 boss, Bishop Alexander. So you have to fight him as you are escaping the island, and, small spoiler alert, this isn't the only time you can fight him. However, this particular fight is important, in my opinion, because it's the first big fight of the game. Like, you'll probably have faced some challenges up to this point, but getting off Act 1 is kind of like the foreshadowing of how big some of these fights are going to get, especially on higher difficulties. Now, by himself, Bishop Alexander isn't that tough. It's just that he has a lot of adds. Again, especially if you're playing on Tactician. So the typical best strategy is to use someone with the teleport skill and pull Bishop Alexander way away from his allies, who will then waste a couple turns getting to you, giving you a chance to just attack Bishop Alexander. However, you do have to be very careful, because once you damage Alexander, and I believe a turn passes after that, a big Voidwoken drill worm gets summoned, and it will deal damage to everything, including Alexander's allies, which really makes this just a fun, unpredictable fight that I really enjoy. Now, in our number 4 spot, for me it is the Harbinger of Doom in Act 2. Now, the Harbinger of Doom is an optional side boss. He is related to a quest that you can do as part of Act 2's main story, if you will. However, you can't avoid him entirely. It's not necessary to kill him in any way. You can just completely skip him. And some people might want to, because while the Harbinger of Doom is alive, he has a buff, or a debuff rather, that he puts on your party called Decaying that is permanent. And it basically reduces all your healing and stuff to 100% and damages you instead of healing you. So basically it just flips your healing. Now, by itself, that's a pretty rough debuff. However, he also has a small party of zombies around. Now, the easiest thing to do for this boss is, again, utilize that teleport skill, in my opinion, and teleport the Harbinger from where he is up to this ledge, because his zombies will then have to waste about 2 turns getting to you, giving you more than enough time if your party's built appropriately to just stunlock the thing down and murder him before he has a chance to do anything, which will then clear the debuff, and then you can handle his zombies without the hassle. And then that brings us to boss fight number 3. So, this guy, the Lamenting Abomination, is a bit of a mystery, in my opinion, because it's the side boss that you can technically tackle whenever in Act 2. There's not really a quest or anything that leads to him. There's kind of a quest involved with the altars nearby that he's standing in front of, and if you go up and talk to this thing for a second, it's clear that it is in an intense amount of pain and that it is trying to pray to something to take that pain away. Now, being a huge Divinity lore buff, which is a good chunk of my channel, actually, I think he's trying to talk to the God King, but truth be told, it's never elaborated upon, and this thing's existence is, never addressed anywhere else in-game, so it's just this random tough boss. Now, by himself, he hits pretty hard, but once you actually engage in combat with him, which if you go up close enough to him to engage in conversation, there is no peaceful way to end that. He will fight you. But more than that, he also summons a bunch of wolves to help him. Now, the wolves themselves are pretty weak, and truth be told, the health and everything of the Lamenting Abomination isn't that crazy. The problem is that the wolves will use Void Howl on the Lamenting Abomination, which just gives him a huge buff to stats. And those stat buffs actually stack with each Void Howl from each wolf. So basically, if you don't lock down the Abomination and kill him first, you're going to have a terrible time as this Abomination just one-shots your party members if you let him get powered up. Moreover, the wolves themselves have the vampire status, if you will, which means if they attack you, they get healed for the damage done. Basically, the Necromancer perk that you get for having points in Necromancer, which can lead to a very tough fight if you're not prepared. But basically, just lock down the Abomination so he doesn't get his buffs. The wolves themselves aren't very strong, and you can easily wipe them off the face of Rivellon after the Abomination is dead. And that brings us to number 2. So, number 2 and number 1 I struggled with a little bit, but number 2 for me is definitely Andromalique, the Archdemon. So most of the game kind of builds up to this big reveal of the fight with him, especially if you're playing as Lohse, but even if you're not, you can still do this confrontation. However, if you're playing as Lohse, you get the option to weaken him, or at least have her in your party, which can kind of add some depth to the fight. But for starters, Andromelik's character model is just crazy, right? So you can see this big demon here, he looks intense. But more than that, this fight is really tough because he has all these nurses, which are actually demons in disguise, because Andromelik is posing as Dr. Deva. And between Andromelik and the nurses, especially on higher difficulty, especially if you haven't weakened him, he is very strong and hits incredibly hard. Now, one of the things you can do if you haven't weakened him is before you get to him, just start attacking his nurses. And then you can kill them separately by themselves before you get to him. That actually helps quite a bit if you want to do that. And then the probably easiest way to handle Andromelik himself, if he isn't weakened, is try to get a rogue next to him to hit him with ruptured tendons, especially on that first turn. Because if you manage to do that, Andromelik likes to move across the entire room basically on his first turn, more or less every time. It kind of depends on your positioning a little, but he'll move basically the length of his room usually on turn 1. And if you have ruptured tendons, which causes damage on movement, he'll basically almost kill himself on that first turn if you manage to hit him with ruptured tendons, which is a great way to kill him basically on any difficulty. He is number 2 just for the fact that the lore behind him and his character model and his abilities and the fact that he's a demon, he's just super cool. And that brings us to our number 1 spot. So for me, this is none other than the Devourer from the gift bag Relics of Rivellon. Gift bags are kind of like mods and expansions, basically. You can turn them off or on and they add some content to the game. I believe Relics of Rivellon was added to the base game, so unlike a lot of them, you can't actually turn it off once it's installed. It's just installed, but it just adds a bunch of extra armor and quests involved with getting those armors, which I have video guides on. And of those, the Devourer is my favorite. Basically, as you can see here, of course, the Devourer is an undead dragon who has been orchestrating some events from his prison, if you will. My guide explains all that. The main thing I want to talk about here is just how cool this boss fight is. So you'll encounter 5 spirits on the lead up to his fight, and then depending on how you interact with those spirits, they can hinder or help you in this fight. The Devourer himself, as you might imagine, hits like an absolute truck, so you want to find ways to lock him down. He can also open up portals that then summon enemies into the fight. It's just an all-around really cool fight, and in my opinion is more of a capstone to your progress and learning than the actual in-game fight is. So there you go, guys. There are my top 5 bosses of Divinity Original Sin 2. Again, by all means, let me know what your top 5 bosses are in the comment section below. But regardless of any of that, just thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.